Well, we are we are continuing our series, No Perfect People Allowed. What an amazing series to be in. What an amazing concept, because it is something that screams to all of us. No perfect people allowed, because of the grace and mercy and goodness of our God. We're all accepted and loved by him. What an amazing gift he's given to us. So last week, if you were here, we've been journeying with the life of a young man, one of the disciples of Jesus named Peter. Peter was this diehard advocate for Jesus, this avid follower of him. And he's a guy who, swore up and down his faithfulness and commitment to Jesus. And he even told Jesus that he would die for him. And he's the same Peter that walked on the water, that got to witness miracles and all kinds. Peter's experienced a lot of things, but he's also a guy that has a lot of foot and mouth opportunities and just pipes off and says stuff that Jesus is like, bro, just stop. Last week, if you were here, Pastor Roy talked about Peter denying Jesus publicly. Jesus had been arrested, and he had even told Peter ahead of time, you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter's like, there's no way. I'm here for you. I'm going to die for you before I would deny you. And Jesus is like, okay. And sure enough, 3 times publicly, Peter denied Jesus. Now you could imagine a guy who's journeyed with Jesus for the last 3 years, witnessing miracles and hearing his story and watching his compassion and love towards the broken and the lost, the spiral that Peter is now in, dealing with his failures. You ever done anything dumb? And you're like, especially maybe if there's been some time that's lapsed between what you did, and you're looking back and you're like, what was I thinking? Now, I have a lot of those in my life, and rather than making this day sad and miserable, I'm going to go back to my childhood. In California, at least in the school district that I was in, they did a thing every year for the 6th graders called 6th grade camp. And for a week, you would go up into the wilderness at a campsite, at this campground, and you'd stay in cabins with everybody. But it was sort of like adventure camp, right? Where you would look at rocks and study geodes and look at plants and animals and look at the stars. It was a week of just kind of science stuff, but you're out in the wilderness. And so, 11, 12-year-old version of me getting ready for 6th grade camp, going out into the wilderness, Sunday evening before we left, I'm packing up my things and I'm trying to think, what do I need to take with me? Now, keep in mind, at this time, my influences were, Chuck Norris and Rambo and Terminator, right? And so I'm like, okay, I want to bring some cool stuff too. And so I snuck into my parents' room, and I thought it would be a brilliant idea, because we're going to the wilderness, to steal my dad's machete. What could go wrong? Machetes are cool, right? I'm like, heck yeah, I'm going to 6th grade camp. I'm taking my machete. I thought it was a great idea. What could go wrong? Could you imagine if this happened today? Lockdowns, and I'd be in handcuffs. And so I steal the machete, and I packed it into my backpack. My mom takes me to school in the morning, and I got it in my backpack, and it looked pretty much just like this. This thing was like, I could barely zip the top. It's like bulging out of the top like this. And first thing we had to do was go to our homeroom, right? We had to go and make sure everybody was there, check in and all that kind of stuff. So we walk in and we drop our bags off by the bus, and I've got my backpack with me, and I sit down in homeroom, and it hadn't occurred to me yet that this could be a bad idea. In my mind, I'm like, I knew I was doing something wrong because I stole my dad's machete. Even saying it out loud is ridiculous. I stole my dad's machete to go to 6th grade camp. But in my mind, it hadn't occurred to me that this was a bad idea. Until we're sitting there, and I put my backpack on the back of my chair, and naturally I was sitting in the back of the class. And I lean over to a girl that I was sitting next to. I happened to have a crush on her. Her name was Mary. And I said, hey, you want to see something cool? I can't even say it with a straight face. I was such a nerd. Want to see something cool? She's like, okay. And I unzip my backpack and I kind of pull that halfway out. And in that moment, I realized by the look on her face, maybe this wasn't a cool idea. Because she kind of like scrunched her face and was like, why'd you bring that? And it was one of those like it all started dawning on me that maybe this is a bad idea. I was like, nah, nonsense, I'm taking it. So we all file out once we checked in and we're heading out to the buses. What I didn't realize was that the parents stuck around to say goodbye to their sixth graders by the bus. And so I'm trying to get to the bus and I'm like waving at my mom, walking this way because I don't want her to see the backpack with this thing bulging out of the top. But she could kind of sense something was off. I mean, sixth graders aren't very sneaky. I've had a few and they don't work very well. And so she goes, Mike, what's in the backpack? It looks a little heavy. I'm like, oh, it's just stuff for the bus, my clipboard and pencils I wanted to draw while we're driving, and I'm anything I could think of. And she could read right through it. So she goes, what's in the backpack? Oh, it's fine, Mom, don't worry about it. I got to get on the bus, and and then the tone changed, and she got serious, and it was, what's in the backpack? And very dramatically, because I was too embarrassed to actually pull out a machete in front of the teachers and students that were still there, I pulled the backpack off, I hold it out and I go, just take it. And the bewilderment is still like on her face, like what is happening right now? And I'm like, just take it. She goes, what's in the backpack? And I'm like, as brave as I could muster, like, it's Dad's machete. She's like, what? And just before I got on the bus, she said a few words that completely ruined sixth grade camp. You can talk about this with your father when you get home. Do you think there was a single day at sixth grade camp that I didn't think about this stupid machete and the fact that I had to talk to my dad when I got home? It ruined the trip because all I could think about was the shame and the guilt and the embarrassment and having to face my dad. And I started asking myself the question like, well, what version of my dad am I going to come home to? Am I going to come home to like judgmental, punishing dad? Like, am I going to get my butt whooped for this? Am I coming home to like gracious dad? Like, hey, it's cool, man. We all make mistakes. Am I coming home to like middle ground dad where it's like, well, maybe we'll be grounded for a few days, but I understand. I was a boy too. I had no idea what version of my dad I was coming home to, and it terrified me. And it ruined the week. And I want to ask a question of you this morning. What version of Jesus do you know? By the way, I forgot to tell us at the 9:30 service, and I had many people ask, so what did your dad do? He grounded me for a couple days. I had middle ground dad. It was great. All that worrying, built up tension and pressure for nothing, because he was actually pretty cool about it. But what version of Jesus do you know? When you think about maybe your mistakes and the failures that you've had in your life, or even just when you're spending time reading his word, what version of Jesus is it? Is it serious Jesus? Where there's no inflection in how he speaks, it's all monotone and kind of boring? Is it solemn and sad Jesus, kind of always walking around slowly, kind of sad and depressed? Because I do think there are people who imagine Jesus to live this way. Was it mad Jesus who's always judgmental and angry? Was it hippie Jesus? Like, hey, love and peace, man. Was it playful Jesus? Oh, yes, Jesus was playful. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. What version of Jesus do you know? When you spend time thinking about who this man is, what do you imagine him to be? The story where we're picking it up, so Peter has denied Jesus when he was arrested. He denied him publicly. Jesus was tortured and crucified, and 3 days later he conquered death and rose from the dead. And at this point, the Bible says he has visited his disciples at least twice that we know of. But there's no indication or story that's told about him having an encounter with Peter until now. We don't know if they've even exchanged words. We don't know if they've kind of come face to face and had any kind of moment until now. We're going to be in John chapter 21, and it says this. Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. I think Peter's reached a point, maybe if he's been with his disciples and he's seen Jesus a couple times, but now he's gone, still spiraling with the guilt and shame of what he's done by denying him publicly. He's like, you know what? I'm going to go do the one thing that I know how to do. I'm going to go fish. I need to clear my head. I'm getting out of here. And so the other disciples were like, yeah, we'll join you. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. If you can imagine this scene for a minute. Here's Jesus, the Lord and creator of all the earth. God in the flesh. He has fulfilled the one thing he set out to do here on earth. He conquered sin and death. He is now resurrected from the dead, and he's just standing as a passerby on the shore. Don't you see a little bit of the playfulness in Jesus? Kind of smirking, little wink in his eye. Because he could have shown up on that beach in all his radiant glory, blinding the disciples with beams of sunlight coming out of him. He could have shown up that way. He is God. But he shows up as just a guy on the beach, and he asks any respectable angler the worst question you could possibly ask, especially after they've had a bad day of fishing. And if you go fishing, you know what I'm talking about. Hey, did you catch anything? Why are you? Hey, why don't you try fishing over there? I think that's a good spot. If you've been out fishing and cast after cast after cast after cast and it's just been nothing, yeah, it may have been a peaceful day, but you know you're irritated. At least one. Give me one fish. Come on, man. And here this guy walks by and wants to ask if I caught anything. Of course I haven't caught anything. The humor that Jesus has, it's amazing and beautiful. And I think so often we're quick to remove the humanity of Jesus when we spend time reading about him and how he talks and interacted with his people. I think he's being sarcastic and funny if you read this story the right way. What do you think Jesus' mood was this morning? You think he was solemn and sad? Of course not. He's just been resurrected from the dead. He has fulfilled the promise that has been going on for ages. Prophecies that were set in place before the foundations of the earth were built. He had a plan to restore humanity back to God, and that plan has been fulfilled. He beat sin and conquered death, and now he's standing on the shore. Of course he's in a good mood. He's ready to mess around and joke around and play with his disciples. The relatability of Jesus here is shocking, right? The nonchalantness of how he's just appearing to his men when he could have done otherwise. Goes on to say, then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. Like, dude, you realize what just happened, right? Like, that's Jesus. And as As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off. He was out there fishing in his skivvies, and jumped into the water. He pulled a Forrest Gump and jumped off to the boat because Lieutenant Dan was standing on the dock. And he's just swimming frantically to get to Jesus. Now, if you compare that to Peter's first encounter with Jesus, when Jesus called him to be a disciple, it's interesting to see the difference. Back in Luke chapter 5, Jesus has been teaching the crowds, and the crowds had gathered around so closely. He's on the shore, and I'm thinking, knowing our playful Jesus, that this is probably the exact same beach, the exact same fishing spot, because I think that's his sense of humor. The crowd was gathering around so much that he gets into a boat that was on the shore. That boat belonged to Simon Peter, who was out cleaning his nets after having a long night of not catching any fish. So in Luke chapter 5, it says this: when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I'll let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." So here you have Peter witnessing the same miracle, two different occurrences. In one instance, when he first meets Jesus, he's saying, "I'm not worthy to be in your presence. Go away from me. I'm a sinful man." And then you have broken failure Peter, who's denied Jesus publicly 3 times, frantically swimming to the shore to get as close to him as he possibly can. Why did Peter jump out of the boat to get to Jesus? Because he knew the Jesus that was waiting on the shore for him. He knew the man that was there. He knew how he would be greeted and accepted and welcomed by his friend. What version of Jesus do you know? We have one side of Peter who's cowering and saying, "I'm a sinful man." And after spending 3 years of watching Jesus do his thing, teaching and preaching, performing miracles and loving on the lost and the broken and showing compassion beyond all measure of anything they'd ever seen before, he knew the man he was running to, swimming to. Peter knows grace. Goes on to say, when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153 to be exact. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Okay, again, try and picture this from the situation that this is and where things are at. Here you have nonchalant Jesus, who has been resurrected from the dead, the Lord and creator of all the earth, calling up his disciples, and he says, "Hey, go grab that fish you just caught." And Peter, he's the first one to run to the boat, and he grabs a net and he's pulling it on the shore. But then it says there was exactly 153. So how did this story play out? Right here you have Jesus, who's holding back all his radiant glory to be nonchalant, standing there in front of his disciples, and Peter going, 1, 2, 3, 4. And Jesus just smiling, patiently waiting on Peter, not being bothered by him in the least. Or maybe it happened this way. Peter runs to the boat and grabs the net and pulls it onto the shore, and he starts counting 1, 2, 3, and he's like 76, 77, and Jesus is like, "Hey, Peter, there's 153. And Peter like, "Oh yeah, it's Jesus." The playfulness of Jesus is written all over this whole story, and it is a beautiful thing. What version of Jesus do you know? Jesus said to them, "Come, let's have some breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. And so Jesus came and he took the bread and he gave it to them, and he did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. Here you have the resurrected God in the flesh. And when Peter walked up to him, what did Jesus not do? You know what he didn't say to Peter? He didn't say, "How dare you? You don't deserve this. I'm here to make breakfast for the other disciples. You denied me. You get out of here." He didn't slap him across the face and say, "How dare you?" Peter, in the midst of his failure, walks up to Jesus, and Jesus says, "Hey, come on. Let's have breakfast. Let me serve you. Sit down. Get some of that fish you just caught that I helped you catch. Let me make you some food. Let me serve you." What version of Jesus do you know? What version of Jesus do you know when you fail? Because sometimes I imagine myself like 6th grade Mike, wondering what kind of version of my dad I'm going to get when I get home, when I mess up again. And I'm wondering, what does Jesus think about me now? What does Jesus think about you? What version of Jesus do you know? What failures do you have to let go of and give to him? Maybe it's a failed marriage. Maybe you messed up royally and ruined your marriage. Maybe there's infidelity. Maybe you've ruined the relationship that you have with your kids. Maybe it's the lust that you can't seem to shake. Maybe it's the websites you can't stop looking at. Maybe it's the bottle you can't put down or the pills you can't stop taking. Maybe it's that, and you fill in the blank. What is it that you need to let go of? What failure are you hanging on to that you have allowed your life to spiral in and wonder with fear and doubt and worry what kind of version of Jesus is looking at you? Because we've seen clearly in the midst of failure, the Jesus that you're going to encounter is saying, "Hey, let's spend some time together. Come, let me serve you." What a beautiful picture of who our Jesus is. This man that we get to call our friend. Which is no light term to throw around, that Jesus is our friend, because when you begin to understand who Jesus is, this man and who he was, Hebrews writes this, Hebrews chapter 1, "In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being." He is the personification of the almighty, all-powerful, all-creating God of the universe. Is this man, Jesus, who is winking and kind of smirking and playing jokes on his disciples and in the midst of failure saying, "Hey, come on, let's hang out. Let me make you some breakfast." What version of Jesus do you know? What version of Jesus do you know in your failures? Is that version of Jesus saying, "Hey, I just want to hang out with you. Let me serve you. Let me nurture you." Sustaining all things by his powerful word, after he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. And that's the same Jesus that Peter is encountering on the beach, who didn't slap him across the face for denying him, who didn't say, "How dare you?" He said, "Come on, let's sit down together. Let me serve you some breakfast." When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And there's been some debate by biblical scholars what he means by more than these. And there's kind of three conclusions that they have. And it's either, do you love me more than the other disciples love me? Or is it, do you love me more than you love the disciples? Or is it, do you love me more than this stuff, these fish, which are worth a lot of money, the nets that you use to catch them, the boat that you have? Do you love me more than your things? Maybe it's all three. Do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, then take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, then feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. So when we bring Jesus our failures, and what a beautiful picture this is, right? 3 failures, 3 times he denied Jesus, and 3 opportunities of reconciliation. Only a playful and loving, gracious God would do it this way. 3 times you deny me, I'm going to give you 3 opportunities to make it right with me. And so when we bring Jesus our failures, you know what we don't get? We don't get the slap across the face and the how dare you. First, he nurtures us. He is not even worried about reconciling us just yet. First, he's going to nurture our souls. He's going to restore us. He's going to serve us. The man in the flesh, God's radiance in this human form is going to serve you. He's going to nurture you. He's going to restore your soul back to health. And then he's going to reconcile your failures. He's going to give you opportunities to make it right. So first, Peter receives grace. And grace is receiving what you don't deserve. Peter didn't deserve to be nurtured. He didn't deserve to receive a breakfast made by Jesus or to be served by Jesus. Peter didn't deserve for his soul to be nurtured by Jesus. He denied him. He deserves to be punished. But then Jesus extends mercy where he doesn't receive what he should. So grace is receiving what we don't deserve, and mercy is not receiving what we do deserve. And here in this beautiful scene, Jesus is pouring out his grace and his mercy. Do you know why? Because that is who he is. It's not, grace and mercy aren't just things that he has. They are character traits of who Jesus is. They are things he will never run out of because it is who he is. To know Jesus is to know mercy, and to know Jesus is to know grace. Because it's who he is. He will never run out. So first he nurtures us. He serves us. Then he reconciles our failures. He allows us an opportunity to make it right, to let go of these failures. But then he charges us to shepherd others in the same way. He says, I'm going to extend you my grace. I'm going to extend you my mercy, and now I want you to go and do the same. I want you to love people the way that I've loved you. I want you to show compassion to the least and the lost and the broken the way that I've put on demonstration for you. I've displayed what it means to do what I do. The word Christian literally means little Christ. Go and be a little Christ. Go and do what I have done. Go to the ends of the earth and share this message of hope that I have, that through me there is salvation, and I'm going to extend my grace and my mercy there unending because it is who I am. Go and take care of my people the way that I have taken care of you. And what he doesn't do, he doesn't overshadow us with guilt and grief. He doesn't hold a grudge over us. He doesn't keep us in a state of despair. He's not going to come back and say, yeah, but you remember that one time? Because once our sins have been removed, when we place our faith in Jesus, the Bible says they're as far away as the east is from the west. God does not see our sin. And now he just wants to nurture us and reconcile us back to him. What version of Jesus do you know? There's an amazing author. His name is John Eldredge. He wrote a book called The Beautiful Outlaw. And in that book, he talks a lot about this playfulness of Jesus. It's a beautiful book about revealing the personality of Jesus as we read Scripture. And here's one of the things he says. For to come to know Jesus intimately as he is, as he wants to be known, is to release a redemptive landslide in your life. Oh, the beauty of that imagery, right? This landslide. Landslides are powerful and they just kind of take out everything, but it's a landslide of redemption. There will be no stopping the goodness. The first purpose of your existence will be resolved, and that's to receive this landslide of redemption. And from there, you are set to fulfill all of God's other purposes for you, to go and do, to love the way that I've loved, to show grace and mercy and compassion and forgiveness to the people around you. Even in our failures, Jesus is our friend. Now, that statement may not be overwhelming for you. You may be like, yeah, cool, Jesus is our friend. But when you begin to comprehend who Jesus is, God incarnate, God in the flesh, Jesus containing all of the radiant glory of the creator of the heavens and the earth in the flesh, standing before you. And all he wants to do is sit and have a meal with you. He wants to know you. He wants to spend time with you. He wants to build a relationship with you because of his grace and his mercy. Let go of your failures. Let go of those things that you cling to. I don't know why we continue to hold on to them. Sometimes our failures are what identify us, and we hold on to our identity. And Jesus is saying, let go of it and let me have it. And I'm going to restore you. I'm going to nurture your soul. I'm going to reconcile you back to me and to have this healthy relationship with the God of all creation. Bring me your failures and watch what I can do with it. Would you bow your heads with me? Jesus, we don't deserve the love that you continue to pour out. Thank you for this example of who you are, the version of the Jesus that we can know, the same version that you showed Peter of just extending your mercy and grace to him, even in the midst of his failure. Lord, give us the courage to let go of our failures and give them to you. And allow you to restore our souls and to nurture us and to reconcile us back to you. Let us experience this redemptive landslide of your goodness. We say these things in your mighty, powerful name. Amen.